Welcome to Lady Mythos. Settle in. Let the day loosen its hold. If it helps, imagine rain against glass, or a dark forest breathing quietly beyond the window. Before we begin, if there's a myth you've been hoping to hear, or a place you're listening from tonight, you're always welcome to leave a note below. I read every one. It helps me understand who's sitting here with me, listening in the dark. Tonight's story doesn't hurry. It doesn't test you. It doesn't ask you to remember names or lineages or who belongs to whom. You're free to close your eyes and let the story take shape on its own, or to stay awake with it, following the images as they arrive, one by one. This is a story from Greek mythology. It's about Zeus, the god of the sky, and the women who ended his life before Hera. Most versions of the myth begin with a marriage, a queen, a throne shared at the center of Olympus. But power does not begin with marriage. Before vows, before crowns, before the word queen ever meant permanence, there were others. Women whose names survived unevenly. Some remembered through their children, some through places, some only through what was taken from them. And here is the part the myths tend to move past too quickly. Before Hera, Zeus was still becoming himself. He was already king, already feared, already obeyed. But he had not yet learned restraint. What followed were not romances in the way we use the word now. They were encounters shaped by imbalance, by curiosity, by hunger, by fate pressing forward before anyone was ready to stop it. Each woman he met changed the world in some small way, and each one changed him, even when he refused to notice. From one, he took wisdom and kept it trapped inside his own body. From another, he learned how law could exist without warmth. From another, he learned how beauty can vanish without leaving a mark. From another, how love can fracture the future long before anyone realizes what's been broken. Not all of them stayed. Not all of them survived unchanged. One refused him outright and became something else entirely. These are not stories of villains and victims neatly divided. They are stories of love entangled with power, of transformation that doesn't ask permission, of fate moving ahead of understanding. Hera does not appear yet, not fully, but her absence matters, because Hera was not Zeus's first love. She was his first consequence. If you've listened here before, you know this space often lingers with figures who history steps past too quickly. Women who stand close to power and are reshaped by it. Women whose stories survive in fragments while the world remembers the god. Tonight, we listen to those fragments. We listen to Metis, to Themis, to Eurynome, to Demeter, to Mnemosyne, to Leto, to Asteria, to Dione. Not as a list, not as footnotes, but as lives that brushed against the sky and never left untouched. Take a slow breath. There's no need to hold on to every detail. The myths will remember for you. And the story begins not with a wedding, not with thunder, but with a quiet question the gods themselves never answered. What happens to love when the one who holds it cannot be changed? In the beginning, Zeus was not surrounded by marble halls or golden thrones. He was surrounded by unfinished things. A sky still settling into place. A world still learning its own rules. A silence that didn't feel peaceful yet, only temporary. Even after the war was won, even after the Titans were driven down and the old order cracked, there were still places where the world felt raw, like it hadn't decided what it was going to become. And in that rawness, Zeus was already king. But kingship, in those early days, wasn't a crown. It was a weight. It sat behind his eyes, in his chest, in the way thunder responded to his mood before he even knew what he was feeling. He could command the sky, but that didn't mean he understood it. And that's the first thing to know about Metis. She wasn't a woman Zeus chased because she was soft. He didn't come to her because he wanted comfort. He came to her because she was the one person in the world who could look at him, really look at him, and see what was coming. Metis was a titaness, older than Zeus in the way that matters, not just by lineage, but by texture, by the kind of knowing that isn't learned through victory, but through surviving long enough to watch patterns repeat. Her name was not a decoration. It meant something. It meant wisdom, yes, but not the kind that sits politely on a shelf. Metis was the kind of wisdom that keeps you alive. The kind that whispers, don't trust the obvious path. The kind that knows when kindness is a trap. The kind that understands that power always has a cost, even when it pretends it doesn't. If Zeus was lightning, fast, absolute, unavoidable, Metis was the air just before it strikes. Still, charged, unignorable, even in silence. He found her in a place that felt fitting for someone like her. Not in a palace, not on Olympus, but near the edges of things. Near water that moved too quietly. Near reeds that bent without breaking. Near an old shore where the world looked like it could still be rewritten. Metis didn't rise when he arrived. She didn't bow. She didn't perform fear. She turned her face toward him like she'd been expecting him the whole time. And Zeus, who had seen titans roar and giants fall and the world burn with war, felt something unfamiliar in his body. Not desire, exactly. Not tenderness. Something else. Something like being met. like someone had finally spoken to the part of him that had no name. He sat with her. That's what the myths won't always emphasize, but you can feel it in the way the story moves. Zeus did not only take Metis, he listened to her. He returned. He asked questions that weren't meant for an audience. What should a king be when the old king was a monster? What does order look like when it's built from ruin? How do you hold the world steady without crushing it? Answered. But she didn't answer like a priest. She answered like someone who had watched too much to be impressed by power. She spoke about balance, about restraint, about the shape of consequence. She warned him, quietly, not dramatically, that the world always circles back, that overthrow becomes pattern, that sons become fathers, that fear repeats itself unless someone has the nerve to interrupt it. And Zeus, for a while, wanted to believe he could be that interruption, that he could be different, that the story could end with him. It's almost sweet, in a way. Almost. Because then something happened that always happens when Zeus begins to feel close to something he cannot control. He began to feel afraid. It wasn't fear of Metis hurting him. It was the deeper fear, that Metis could see through him, that she could name the thing he was trying not to admit. Because there was a prophecy. There is always a prophecy. Not shouted from the mountaintops, not delivered with drums and flames, but carried like a quiet splinter in the mind. Metis would bear children. The first would be a daughter, bright, sharp, impossible to ignore. And then there would be a son who would someday rise, a son who would do to Zeus what Zeus had done to Cronus. And when Zeus heard that, something in him tightened. Not because he didn't love Metis, not because he didn't respect her, but because he suddenly understood that the world did not care that he wanted to be different. The world had rules older than his intentions. Zeus had overthrown his father. His father had overthrown his, and the pattern was still warm, still recent, still hungry. You can imagine him walking alone after hearing it. The sky heavy above him, like it was listening. His hands flexing without reason. The way a person moves when their mind is carrying two incompatible truths at once. Because here was Metis, wise, calm, his counselor, his companion. And here was the prophecy, sitting between them like a third presence at the table. Zeus could not unhear it. And this is where the story shifts. Because Zeus does not know how to live beside a threat. He only knows how to remove it. At first, he tried to reason his way out of it. He tried to imagine a future where the prophecy could be softened. He tried to convince himself it was only rumor, only fear, only Titan talk meant to keep him uneasy. But Metis, being Metis, did not lie to him to soothe him. She told him the truth as she saw it. And that honesty, as much as he admired it, sealed her fate. One day, Zeus came to her with a gentleness that might have felt like love. He didn't arrive as thunder. He didn't arrive as king. He arrived as someone trying to be careful. He sat close to her by the water. He spoke softly. He asked her to show him one of her tricks, because Metis was known for them. Not parlor tricks, not entertainment, the kind of shape-shifting that isn't about spectacle, but survival. The kind you learn when the world is dangerous, and you need to become whatever will get you through it. Metis smiled. Not because she was foolish, but because she trusted him. And perhaps, in a small, quiet corner of herself, she believed he had listened enough to choose differently. She became a bird. A small one. Light enough to rest on a branch without bending it. Then a drop of water, sliding through his fingers. Then a spark. Then something so small, it barely seemed to exist at all. And Zeus did something no lover should ever do. He reached forward, and he swallowed her. No storm, no battle, no warning. Just the sudden, terrible simplicity of it. One moment she was there, moving, breathing, shifting, and the next she was gone into him, taken into the place no one could retrieve her from. If you try to picture it, don't picture violence the way mortal stories do. This is divine. It's quieter than you expect. It's more final. It's like watching a door close without sound, and then realizing it has no handle on the other side. Metis did not vanish into nothing. That's the part that lingers. Because even inside Zeus, Metis remained alive. Not in the way mortals live, but present, aware, still thinking, still being Metis. And she was pregnant. That too is important, because Zeus believed swallowing her would prevent the prophecy. He believed he could consume the future the same way Cronus had tried to consume his own children. Only Zeus told himself it was different. Cronus swallowed out of panic. Zeus swallowed out of strategy. Cronus was brutal. Zeus was practical. That's what he would have said. That's what kings always say when they do something unforgivable and want it to sound like reason. But the story doesn't let him escape that easily. Because wisdom does not dissolve just because you force it into silence. Metis remained inside him. And she did what she had always done. She adapted. She endured. And she began to work. Deep inside Zeus's body, in a place no one could see, Metis began to make something. A child. A daughter. Not soft, not passive, not a quiet consolation. A daughter forged like a decision. As the months passed, Zeus began to change in ways he didn't understand. He became restless, irritable. He felt pressure behind his eyes, like a storm trapped under skin. His thoughts became too loud, his dreams too sharp. And then came the ache. A headache so intense it stopped even a god in his tracks. Imagine Zeus, lord of thunder, breaker of titans, sitting alone, pressing his palm to his forehead, jaw clenched, breathing through pain like a mortal. Not because he was weak, but because something inside him was insisting on being born. The myths tell it in a moment, a sudden crack, a dramatic arrival. But in the way the story feels, it's slower, it's inevitable. Eventually, Zeus could no longer bear it. He called for help. And depending on which telling you hold close, it was Hephaestus or Prometheus, or another divine hand skilled enough to do what was needed. A blade, a strike, a split. Not to harm Zeus, but to open the place where Metis had been trapped. And from Zeus's head, from the space where thought and command and judgment are formed, Athena emerged. Fully grown, armored, bright-eyed, not crying, not confused, not asking permission. She came into the world like she had been waiting. And when she stood before Zeus, something cold moved through him. Because he had swallowed Metis to avoid being overthrown by a son. But instead, he had birthed something else entirely. A daughter of wisdom and war. A mind that could rival his. A presence that did not fear him. Metis had not been erased. She had been rerouted. Her wisdom had found another way out. And Zeus, whether he admitted it or not, had learned the first lesson of the night. You can take someone into yourself and still not control what they become. If you listen closely to the silence after Athena's birth, you can feel it. Zeus standing there, trying to make sense of what he had done, trying to call it victory, trying to call it necessity. And somewhere, deep inside him, Metis still present, not screaming, not begging, not fading, just watching. Because wisdom, once swallowed, does not die. It waits. And it speaks from inside your decisions. And in the years that followed, Zeus would be praised for Athena's brilliance, for her strength, for her clarity. He would call her his daughter, his pride, his proof of power. But almost no one would speak of Metis again. Not loudly, not often. Not in the way they spoke of Hera later. Metis became something the myth glanced past. A beginning tucked away. A woman turned into a lesson. And yet, if you think about it, truly think about it, Athena did not come from Zeus alone. She came from the one he could not destroy. The one he tried to silence inside himself. The one who remained. And as the rain continues outside our window tonight, soft and patient, we can let that truth sit with us for a moment. not as judgment, just as presence. Because the story moves on. It always does. And Zeus, still king, still learning, still hungry, will reach next for a different kind of woman. Not wisdom this time, but law. And what he cannot swallow, he will try to build. So rest your eyes if you need to. Let the scene fade gently. And when you're ready, we'll step from the shoreline of Metis into the still, steady halls of Themis. After Metis, the world did not rush to heal. Nothing visibly broke. The sky still held. The seas still moved when the moon told them to. Olympus still stood where it had always stood. But something had shifted in the way Zeus carried himself. It wasn't guilt, not regret. It was caution. Wisdom had not destroyed him, but it had unsettled him. And Zeus, when unsettled, did what he often did next. He looked for structure. That is where Themis enters the story. Not like Metis, emerging from the edges of the world. Not like a challenge. Not like a mirror. Themis was already there. She existed in places Zeus rarely lingered, in the pauses between decisions, in the customs that survived war, in the quiet understanding that some things were done not because they were kind, but because they kept the world from tearing itself apart. Themis was law before it had teeth. Not punishment, not enforcement, balance. She was a titaness, yes, but her power did not announce itself. It did not roar. It did not bend the sky. It waited. If Metis was the question Zeus couldn't silence, Themis was the answer that didn't need to speak. When Zeus came to her, it wasn't with longing. It was with intention. He had learned that swallowing wisdom did not make it his. So this time, he did something different. He married order instead. There is no chase in this story. No disguise, no moment of resistance. The union of Zeus and Themis feels almost administrative, necessary, as though the world itself leaned in and said, "Now, this must happen now." Together, they shaped something new. Not a family in the way mortals understand it, but a framework. From Themis came the Horai, the seasons, the hours, the keepers of rhythm. They did not bring joy, they brought timing. The moment when seeds are planted, the moment when harvest must be gathered, the moment when peace is possible, the moment when justice can no longer wait. And from Themis also came the Moirai, the fates. Not cruel, not kind, precise. 3 figures who measured existence without consulting desire. Length, allotment, ending. Even Zeus did not command them completely, and that mattered. For the first time since the war, Zeus allowed something to exist beside him that he could not fully override. That was Themis's gift, and her distance. Because Themis did not sit beside Zeus in the way Metis had. She did not whisper. She did not soften him. She did not ask who he was becoming. She established what must be done and stepped back. If Metis had been intimacy, Themis was function. If Metis had spoken to Zeus's mind, Themis spoke to the shape of the world itself. And Zeus accepted this. He ruled better with her near. The gods learned when to speak. Mortals learned when to swear oaths, and when breaking them would cost more than they could afford. Order settled like stone beneath Olympus. Solid, reliable, cold. But stone does not comfort. And over time, Zeus began to feel the absence of something he could not name. Because law does not look at you when you are tired. It does not notice hesitation. It does not care why you failed, only that you did. Themis did not wound Zeus. She also did not reach him. And slowly, quietly, the space between them became permanent. There is no myth of betrayal here. No dramatic turning away. Themis simply became part of the background of the world. Present. Necessary. Untouched by affection. She would later sit beside Zeus's throne as advisor, not as lover. A voice of protocol. A reminder of consequence. And Zeus, still king, still learning, understood something new. Wisdom had frightened him. Order had steadied him. But neither had stayed. And so, when the world felt too rigid, when the halls of Olympus echoed without warmth, when power began to feel heavy instead of sharp, Zeus did what he always did next. He looked for something lighter, something that wouldn't challenge him, something that wouldn't warn him, something that would not ask him to change. He reached not for law, but for grace. Let the scene fade, stone cooling in shadow, scales resting perfectly balanced. And when the light returns, it will fall on laughter, on movement, on beauty that does not linger long enough to accuse anyone. Next, we step into the presence of Eurynome. After law, Zeus did not want depth. He did not want warning. He did not want prophecy, or balance, or the weight of what comes next. He wanted something that would pass through his hands without staying there. That is how Eurynome enters the story, not as a challenge, not as a correction, as relief. Eurynome belonged to the older waters, born of the great currents that circled the world long before Olympus learned to call itself permanent. She was an Oceanid, but she did not carry the sea's fury. She carried its ease, the kind of ease that comes from knowing how to move without resistance. If Themis was stone, Eurynome was motion. If Themis asked the world to hold its breath, Eurynome reminded it how to exhale. Zeus met her away from halls and thrones, near open water, near places where nothing was fixed for long. Eurynome did not wait for him. She danced, not for him, not because she was summoned, because movement was simply what she did. Her joy was not loud. It did not announce itself. It shimmered, and Zeus, who had been standing in stillness for too long, felt himself loosen in her presence. There were no questions between them. No long conversations about the shape of the future. No warnings carried in soft voices. With Eurynome, Zeus did not have to decide who he was becoming. He only had to be. Their time together did not feel like a beginning. It felt like a pause, like something the world allowed itself after surviving too much. From Eurynome came the Graces, 3 daughters, light as breath. Not rulers, not judges. They did not command anything. They adorned. They moved through the world, leaving impressions that faded as quickly as they appeared. Joy, ease, brightness that did not demand explanation. They did not stay where they were born. They drifted, through feasts, through songs, through the moments people remember fondly but cannot quite describe. And Zeus loved them. In the way one loves something that never challenges you, in the way one loves a season that does not last long enough to become difficult. But Eurynome herself was never meant to remain. She did not anchor herself to Zeus. She did not weave herself into his rule. She did not ask for permanence. Grace, by its nature, does not cling. It passes through. And Zeus allowed that, because it asked nothing of him. No reckoning, no reflection, just movement, just light, just the sense that not everything needed to leave a mark to be real. But there is a quiet cost to that kind of love, because what leaves no mark also leaves no memory strong enough to protect it. Over time, Eurynome became something Zeus remembered fondly, but vaguely. A presence without edges, a warmth without weight. When she moved on, the world did not crack. Nothing had to be repaired. Nothing needed to be swallowed or enforced or restructured. She simply was no longer there. And Zeus barely noticed the moment it happened. That too is important, because it taught him something dangerous. That love could exist without consequence. That intimacy could be enjoyed without responsibility. That beauty did not have to stay to matter. And once that lesson settles in, it changes the way a god reaches for the next thing. Because the next time Zeus loved, it would not be light. It would be rooted. It would sink into the world itself. And when it broke, the world would feel it. Let the water still. Let the laughter fade into distance. The air grows heavier now, scented with soil, with grain, with the quiet promise of growth and loss. Next, we follow Zeus to the earth, to Demeter. When Zeus turned toward Demeter, the world slowed. Not because time stopped, but because everything suddenly had weight. Demeter was not distant like the sky. She was not fluid like water. She was here, in soil pressed beneath bare feet, in grain heads bending toward the sun, in the quiet patience of things that grow whether they are watched or not. Demeter did not rule from above. She worked. She moved through the world with her hands open, touching what others overlooked. She knew the names of seeds, the timing of rain, the long memory of land that had been burned and planted again. Where Zeus commanded, Demeter sustained. And that difference mattered. Their closeness did not feel sudden. It grew the way fields do, slowly, over time, through shared presence rather than pursuit. There are no stories of Zeus disguising himself for Demeter. No storms, no tricks, only inevitability. They were siblings, yes. The myths do not soften that. But the world they inhabited did not divide itself cleanly between what was permitted and what was powerful. Zeus came to Demeter not as conqueror, but as someone drawn to what he could not create on his own. Because thunder can break the ground open, but it cannot make anything grow. From their union came Persephone, a daughter born quietly, without prophecy, without warning. She arrived like spring does, unexpected, but immediately necessary. Demeter loved her with a focus that startled the gods. Not with indulgence, with attention. She taught Persephone the patience of growth, the difference between dormancy and absence, the way something can disappear underground without being gone. Zeus watched this love from a distance. He did not interrupt it, not at first, because Demeter did not challenge his rule. She did not warn him. She did not ask him to change. She simply loved. And that kind of love, rooted, steady, unbending, creates something even gods underestimate: attachment. The trouble is, Zeus did not understand attachment the way Demeter did. To him, children were outcomes, symbols, extensions of legacy. To Demeter, Persephone was continuity, the future made visible. And so, when Persephone grew, when her laughter moved through fields like wind through tall grass, the world quietly adjusted around her. And Zeus, without fully realizing it, set something irreversible in motion. Because one day, another god noticed Persephone, and Zeus did not say no. He did not say yes either. He simply aloud. That moment belongs to another story, another night, but its shadow begins here. Because Demeter's love for Persephone did not fade when Persephone was taken. It hardened, it deepened, it reshaped the world. The seasons themselves bent around Demeter's grief. Growth withdrew, fields emptied. The earth remembered what it was like to be barren. And Zeus, who had believed love could exist without consequence, learned too late that some bonds do not dissolve quietly. Demeter did not rage like a storm. She endured like land in drought. And endurance, when pushed too far, becomes refusal. Zeus eventually intervened. Compromises were made. The world adjusted, but the damage was done. Because from Demeter, Zeus learned something he could not undo. That love tied to the earth does not disappear when ignored. It waits. It returns. It demands recognition. And when it is denied, it takes the future with it. As Demeter withdrew, as the world slowly found its rhythm again, Zeus turned away from the soil. He had felt the weight of rooted love, and it frightened him. So next, he reached for something lighter, something that would not cling to the ground, something that lived not in soil, but in memory. Let the fields fade into dusk, the grain stills, the earth breathes. And as night settles, we move into a quieter place, where voices linger long after they are spoken. Next, we meet Mnemosyne. After the earth, Zeus sought quiet. Not silence exactly, but something softer than consequence. He had felt the weight of roots, the pull of bonds that did not loosen when ignored. The way love, when tied to the world itself, could bend seasons and starve fields. So he turned away from soil and sky both, and stepped instead into memory. This is where Mnemosyne waits. She did not dwell in halls or groves or shores that could be easily marked. She lived in pauses, in recollection, in the place where moments go when they are no longer happening, but are not yet gone. Mnemosyne was a titaness, older than most stories care to remember. Her power was quiet, but it was absolute. Nothing truly vanished where she was concerned. If Demeter taught the world how to grow and return, Mnemosyne taught it how to remember. Zeus did not approach her as king. He came as something closer to human. The stories say he took the form of a shepherd, not to deceive her, but to disappear a little himself, to step out of the shape that always demanded response. They met beneath open sky, where the night moved slowly. No witnesses, no expectations. Mnemosyne did not question him. She did not ask what he wanted. She understood that wanting itself was temporary. What mattered was what would remain after. Their time together did not feel like urgency. It stretched. 9 nights. Not rushed, not stolen. 9 nights where nothing dramatic happened, and everything did. They spoke. They listened. They sat with the kind of closeness that doesn't insist on definition. And when Zeus left her, he did not feel relief. He felt full, as though something had been placed gently inside him, not swallowed, not trapped, but held. From Mnemosyne came the Muses. 9 daughters, each distinct, each carrying a different way of paying attention to the world. They did not rule. They did not punish. They inspired. Song, story, history, movement. The careful act of noticing. They made mortals linger over moments that would otherwise slip past. They taught the world how to turn experience into meaning. And Zeus was proud of them. Not because they extended his power, but because they softened it. For a time, Zeus believed he had found a form of love that left no damage. Memory does not demand possession. It does not insist on permanence. It allows things to pass and still remain. But there is something dangerous about memory too, because memory makes comparison possible, and once something is remembered, it can never be undone. Mnemosyne did not bind Zeus. She did not challenge him. But she left him changed in a way he did not immediately recognize. She gave the world a way to remember him, not just as king, not just as thunder, but as presence, as story, as something that could be returned to again and again. And Zeus, unknowingly, had allowed himself to become permanent in a new way, not through fear, through recollection. Still, memory does not stay close forever. Mnemosyne did not follow Zeus back to Olympus. She remained where she had always been, holding what was. And Zeus, once again, moved on. Because memory is gentle. And Zeus was not finished testing how much the world could hold. Ahead of him waited a woman who would carry endurance itself. A woman who would wander without shelter. A woman whose suffering would finally summon something new into the world. The night deepens now. The voices of the Muses fade into distance. And somewhere far off, a woman walks beneath a sky that will not welcome her. Next, we follow Zeus to Leto. When Zeus came to Leto, he did not come lightly. Something in him had slowed. Wisdom had unsettled him. Law had steadied him. Grace had passed through without consequence. The earth had taught him weight. Memory had made him linger. Leto carried all of that without asking to. She was a titaness of the old blood, quiet where others were loud, patient where others demanded space. Her presence did not bend the world around her. The world bent away. Leto did not live at the center of things. She existed in the in-between, not hidden, just unchosen. And perhaps that was what drew Zeus to her. She did not look at him with expectation. She did not warn him. She did not mirror him. She accepted him as something vast and distant, the way one accepts weather. Their union did not feel like conquest. It felt like inevitability. And when Leto became pregnant, the world noticed. Not because Zeus declared it, but because Hera did. This is the first time Hera's presence enters the story as more than absence. Not as wife, not as queen, as force, as refusal. Hera did not strike Leto. She did not speak to her. She simply closed the world. No land was allowed to receive her. No shore could offer rest. No city would open its gates. Leto walked, day after day, her body heavy with life, her feet blistered by ground that would not claim her. She asked nothing extravagant, only a place to stop. But the earth stayed silent, and Zeus, king of the sky, did not intervene. Not because he could not, because he hesitated. Because to protect Leto openly would be to acknowledge what he had done. So Leto endured. This is what defines her. Not beauty, not desire. Endurance. She wandered until her strength thinned, until even the sea seemed unsure where to place her. And then, finally, something answered. An island. Not anchored, not claimed. A drifting piece of earth that belonged nowhere. Delos. It rose just enough to hold her. Just enough to break Hera's decree without defying it. There, beneath a palm tree, with the sea watching quietly, Leto labored. Even then, Hera withheld mercy. The goddess of childbirth was kept away. Time stretched cruelly. Pain lingered longer than it should have. But Leto did not cry out for vengeance. She held on. And in that holding, something extraordinary happened. First came Artemis, quiet, watchful, a child born into hardship who immediately understood it. Then, after Artemis had already taken her place at her mother's side, came Apollo, bright, clear, a presence that seemed to pull light into the world simply by existing. The sky did not thunder, the earth did not split, but something shifted, because endurance had finally been rewarded. And Hera, despite herself, could not erase what had already arrived. Leto did not chase honor afterward. She did not demand apology. She raised her children. She stayed present. She remained what she had always been: steady, dignified, unbroken. And Zeus? Zeus watched from a distance. He had not protected her the way he could have. But he had not destroyed her either. From Leto, Zeus learned something he had not learned before: that survival itself can be a form of power, and that some women do not need to be saved to endure gods. As Leto recedes from the center of the story, she leaves something behind. Not conflict, not rupture, a boundary. And Zeus, once again, stands at the edge of what he does not fully understand. Because the next woman he reaches for will not endure him. She will refuse him. And in refusing, she will change the shape of the world. Let the island drift back into the dark. Let the sea close its hands. And when the sky grows quiet again, we turn to the one who would not stay. Next, we follow Asteria. Asteria did not wait for Zeus to arrive. She felt him before he spoke her name. Some beings sense weather before it breaks. Some know when the air has shifted and there is no going back. Asteria was like that. She was a titaness of stars and night-falling light. A presence tied to what moves across the sky and disappears without being owned. Her name carried distance in it, not oldness, freedom. Where Leto endured, Asteria watched. She had seen what happened to those who remained still when Zeus turned his attention toward them. She did not believe in surviving afterward. She believed in not being taken at all. Zeus did not approach Asteria with strategy. He came with certainty. The kind that assumes the world will adjust. And when she turned away from him, when she did not soften, did not slow, did not pretend not to understand what he wanted, something unfamiliar stirred in Zeus. Resistance. Not anger at first. Surprise. Because gods were not often refused. And Asteria did not argue. She did not bargain. She did not explain herself. She ran. Across the sky, across open space where there was nothing to hide behind. Zeus followed. Not in rage, in pursuit. Lightning did not strike, thunder did not fall. This was not punishment. This was insistence. Asteria knew she could not outrun him forever. So she did something no one expected. She changed. Not to become stronger, not to fight, to disappear. As Zeus closed in, Asteria took the shape of a bird. Small, fast, impossible to hold, and flung herself from the sky into the open sea. There was no hesitation, no second thought. The water received her, and she did not rise again as herself. Where she fell, something new formed. An island, unanchored, unclaimed, drifting. The world called it Delos. Asteria had not escaped Zeus by overpowering him. She escaped by becoming something he could not pursue without consequence. Land cannot be chased, it must be approached. And Zeus, who ruled the sky, did not follow her into that final transformation. He stopped, not defeated, but changed. Because for the first time, a woman had removed herself from the story entirely. Asteria did not endure him. She did not survive him. She did not remain to be remembered as his. She chose elsewhere, and the world adjusted around that choice. Later, Delos would become sacred. Later, gods would gather there. Later, it would hold the weight of other stories. But none of that belonged to Zeus's pursuit. It belonged to Asteria's refusal. She had found a way out, and Zeus, standing at the edge of the sea, learned something sharp and unsettling. That power cannot claim what does not stay. That sometimes the only victory is absence. The sky did not darken when she vanished. No one punished her. No balance was restored. The story simply moved on. And Zeus moved with it. Because there was one more name left from that earlier time. One more woman whose presence lingered in echoes rather than scenes. One whose memory survived in voices, not bodies. As the sea stills and the island drifts out of sight, we turn toward what remains when stories thin. Next, we listen for Dione. By the time Zeus reached Dione, the world had learned how to forget. Not all at once, not completely, but softly. The way voices thin over distance. The way footsteps disappear from a well-worn path. Dione did not belong to one place. That is part of why she is difficult to hold in the story. Some remembered her as a Titaness, others as an Oceanid. Some simply knew her as the goddess who stood beside Zeus before that place was claimed by someone else. Her name meant something once. It meant female divinity. It meant counterpart. It meant presence, equal enough to stand without explanation. In the old sanctuary at Dodona, Zeus was worshipped beside her, not above her, not alone. Their voices were heard together in the rustling of oak leaves, in wind moving through branches rather than thunder splitting the sky. Dione did not rule. She witnessed. She listened. She remembered when the world was quieter, when gods did not need spectacle to be believed. Zeus did not pursue her the way he had pursued others. There is no story of transformation here, no resistance, no dramatic turning point. Their closeness felt assumed, as though it belonged to an older version of the world, one that did not need to explain itself. From Dione came Aphrodite, or so some remembered. Not born from sea foam alone, but from a union that once made sense before myths decided it was inconvenient. Aphrodite's beauty would later overwhelm the world. She would command attention, desire, conflict. But Dione remained in the background. A presence felt most clearly when she was no longer centered. When Aphrodite was wounded in war, it was Dione who held her. It was Dione who reminded her that gods endure pain too, and that suffering does not erase divinity. But time is not kind to what does not insist on itself. As Olympus grew louder, as hierarchy hardened, as Zeus's rule became more solitary, Dione's name began to slip. She was remembered in fragments, in alternate tellings, in places people stopped visiting. She was not erased violently. She was replaced. And replacement, more than destruction, is what myths do best. Zeus did not cast her out. He simply stopped standing beside her, and the world followed his attention elsewhere. That is how Dione became a question mark, a footnote, a mother whose name depended on which version of the story you were told. She did not resist this. She did not demand correction. She remained where she had always been, in memory, in echo, in the quiet persistence of places that outlast belief. And Zeus, whether he noticed or not, had reached the end of something. The women who came before Hera were not mistakes. They were foundations. Each one taught him something he would carry into his marriage, whether he acknowledged it or not. Wisdom, order, grace, attachment, memory, endurance, refusal, erasure. By the time Hera would take her place beside him, Zeus was no longer learning who he was. He was learning what remained. Let the leaves at Dodona settle. Let the voices thin into wind. The story is nearly done now. All that's left is to sit with what lingers after power has passed through so many hands. Slow your breath. The night is deep, and in the quiet that follows, we'll allow the meaning to surface. Not as explanation, but as presence. Now, we move gently toward the end, toward what all of this becomes, toward the silence that remembers. Thank you for keeping watch with me. The night has gone very still, not empty, just settled, as though the stories themselves have found a place to rest. Zeus does not stand here now, not as thunder, not as king, not as a figure reaching outward. In this quiet, he exists only as memory, as consequence, as the shape left behind when power passes through lives and moves on. The women we've listened to tonight do not gather together. They were never meant to. They remain where they belong, in wisdom that speaks from inside thought, in lore that holds without warmth, in beauty that passes without asking to be remembered, in soil that remembers loss longer than joy, in memory that refuses to fade, in endurance that survives abandonment, in refusal that reshapes the world, in names that echo even after belief thins. They do not ask for judgment. They do not need to be defended. Their presence alone is enough. Because myth is not a court, it is a landscape, and landscapes keep traces. Footsteps pressed into ground, shadows where something once stood. Places where the air feels different for no obvious reason. Hera will come. Her story is waiting. But tonight was never about arrival. It was about what existed before permanence, before vows hardened into structure, before power learned how to sit beside consequence. If these stories felt incomplete, that's not a failure. That's how memory works. It doesn't offer closure. It offers continuity. You don't leave myth having learned the lesson. You leave it carrying something quieter. A question. A feeling. A name that returns when you least expect it. And long after the thunder fades, long after the sky clears, those things remain. Thank you for listening slowly, for letting the story breathe. Wherever you are tonight, may the world soften its edges for you. You don't need to hold on to the myths. They know how to wait. Rest now. The night is still listening. Yours, Lady Mythos.